This week on The Record, freezing federal funds, why this pause comes from the comptroller's office, not the White House. Fiery speech, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker's defiant challenge to Donald Trump.
We don't have kings in America.
Permission granted? What are colleges and universities allowed to explore in academic research with federal grant funds? Are there limits to academic freedom if those pursuits come with strings attached?
Less money should go to bureaucrats.
Senator Eric Schmidt is on The Record. 4 more years?
My governing philosophy is to hire good leaders and then get out of their way.
Mayor Tashara Jones makes her case to voters as we examine her record from inside her office. It's all coming up right now. Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. Mayor Tashara Jones wants your vote. And 1 week from Tuesday, she faces her first test on her way to seek re-election for 4 more years. But unlike her challengers seeking that same office, she's the only one running with a record in that office for voters to examine. So that's where we met her, to look back at the highs and lows of her first 4 years to see how she reflects on the powers, limitations, and potential of a powerful office. Your office recently commissioned a citywide poll to ask voters how they feel about police and public safety. We have the responses to that poll, and 38% said they fear murder, gunshots, other forms of physical violence most. 80% of that group said they fear gunshots most, and I think the takeaway here is that people in St. Louis are fearful, and they don't always know if someone's going to come save them. I'm going to read one more statistic from this survey for you. 58% of the city that responded to this survey said they called 911 in the last year. 22% said no one responded. Shouldn't that be a sign that bringing more police in would be a top priority of this office?
Well, we have to look at our entire system, from 911 all the way through our criminal justice system, and we're making progress. When I became mayor, 57% of calls on average were answered in the first 10 seconds. And now we're up at 70 to 75% because we've hired more 911 dispatchers, we've paid them more, and we're building a new $45 million 911 facility that's going to house all of our dispatchers because it's a broken and disjointed system, which is a holdover of previous administrations. It used to be when you called 911, the police dispatch answered first to triage you to see what your issue is, and then sent you either to EMS or fire. Now you have a answering service that says which one do you want, and you self-select, and then we pick up there. So we have made progress when it comes to response to our emergency response.
Sure, I appreciate the long-term plan for the 911 center. That's how many years off?
2 years.
2 years off. That'll perhaps be something, but that's just the first interaction. Most people calling 911 are asking for a police officer, some for fire, some for EMS, but most are calling for police, and 1 in 5 say no one shows up. So isn't there a problem beyond just who picks up the phone and how quickly?
Well, we also are investing in prevention and intervention resources as well. So the police are not always the right response to a lot of the calls that we receive in our 911 center. We conducted a survey through the Center for Policing Equity and found that up to 43% of calls can be answered by someone other than police. So we have a cops and clinicians program that pairs a behavioral health professional with an officer. We have a non-police response that responds to people who are having substance abuse problems or public drunkenness, for example, and don't need a police response. We have to invest in both because what we want to do is take off the burden from our police for responding to every call, and it doesn't always need a police response.
Sure, and certainly they don't, as it stands now, they don't respond to every call, but police were quite popular in this perception survey that your office took. Only 17% said they were not satisfied with the officer who showed up. That stands out. What do you think of that number?
I think that's a great compliment to the men and women of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department.
It would seem to suggest to me that the voters are quite pleased with the officers. They're just not as pleased with the staffing levels.
Well, we are working constantly on increasing our staffing levels, and it's not just St. Louis that has a problem with staffing levels in their police department. It is every city across this country. When I talk to my brother and sister mayors from across the country, some are offering incentive or hiring bonuses from $25,000 to $100,000 to hire new officers, and they still can't. So this is an issue that's, I would say, specific to the industry as a whole, of why people aren't choosing to enter this industry anymore.
I'd like to ask, I'll move on, but.
Yes, let's just, come on, move on.
You've talked at length about the challenges that you inherited, you say, inside the city jail. When you look back at all the jail deaths that happened in your term in office, what is something you might have done differently?
Well, one death is one too many. And a sign of a good leader is their ability to get all of the information and then pivot or make a new decision or a different decision. And we've done so. We brought in a new interim commissioner in Doug Burris. We've also brought in the Department of Health and a new health care organization to oversee healthcare in the jail or in the CJC, and we've seen progress. In 2024, we had 2 deaths, which still one is one too many, which is also closer to the national average of 1.2.
Jail deaths did double under Mayor Cruzen compared to the last 4 years under Mayor Slay, and they rose even higher under your 4 years. Do you think the public is satisfied with calling that progress?
Well, again, in 2022, we saw 6, in 2023, we saw 5, and in 2024, we saw 2.
So you're confident the number's pointing down and going to stay that way?
We are confident that we're moving in the right direction.
A recent dust-up at the jail got a lot of attention. You endorsed Alfred Montgomery for sheriff. He's now tangled up in an apparent FBI investigation, perhaps triggered by your office or the police department, I'm not quite sure. In your administration, your public safety director is openly and publicly calling him a liar. Did you know what you were getting in Alfred Montgomery?
Well, that is a sensitive topic, and I can't talk about that because it's under investigation. So we're going to have to move on.
I won't ask you to speak about the investigation. What did you see? What did you think you were getting in him when you endorsed him?
Well, hindsight is 20/20. I wanted change in the sheriff's office. We did not have a great relationship with Sheriff Betts, and we wanted change in the office.
Big picture, some people might look at this and say, well, if managing the jail is such a headache for the mayor, the sheriff would almost be doing you a favor taking control of it, wouldn't he?
I can't speak on that.
Is that a change you would consider?
No,
No.
it's not.
Off the table?
Off the table.
Okay. If you don't win re-election, what will your legacy be?
If I don't win, my legacy will be that I was the first mayor that in years to be intentional about investing in North St. Louis. And that's seen through our investment map that's currently online that shows the houses that we've built. We've built 3,500 housing units. We've demolished over 900 vacant buildings. We've repaired over 800 homes for our seniors so our seniors can age in place. And the list goes on and on. My legacy will also be that I made sure that we tried to get every federal and philanthropic investment necessary to help our city grow. And that's just literally scratching the surface. And I also know that my legacy will be that we put St. Louis back on the map.
A lot more to that conversation. It's up on KSDK.com right now. We also have full-length interviews with all 4 candidates running in this mayor's primary race, the election a week from Tuesday. Plus, tune into 5 Plus Monday for an extended version of this episode. We're back in a moment. Who's the leader of the Democratic Party? That's a question very few people in Washington can seem to answer these days. Maybe that's because the next leader of the party isn't in Washington. It sure sounded like Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker wanted to take on President Donald Trump when he delivered his 7th State of the State address.
My oath is to the Constitution of our state and of our country. We don't have kings in America, and I don't intend to bend the knee to one. I'm not speaking up in service to my ambitions, but in deference to my obligations. If you think I'm overreacting and sounding the alarm too soon, consider this. It took the Nazis 1 month, 3 weeks, 2 days, 8 hours, and 40 minutes to dismantle a constitutional republic. And all I'm saying is that when the 5-alarm fire starts to burn, every good person better be ready to man a post with a bucket of water if you want to stop it from raging out of control.
And the governor borrowed rhetorical flourishes from Lincoln's House Divided speech, warning about the seeds of hate that can divide a house. Other major political and fiscal maneuvers in that speech, too. He wants to defund health benefits for undocumented immigrants. Republicans suspect the governor's Office of Management and Budget could be basing its budget on a mirage, rosy projections of tax money they doubt will ever show up.
Last week, we were hearing that Illinois had a $3.2 billion shortfall. And then this week, prior to the governor's address, we had heard that they found $2 billion. So that's just very fuzzy math. We've not seen any statements that will corroborate that. And so waiting to find where this $2 billion has magically appeared from.
In D.C., mass layoffs continue as Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency continue disrupting federal agencies at rapid speed. Federal workers pushing back with lawsuits, and contractors, universities, and major businesses across the country that win federal funds, they're raising questions about what federal money can they really count on as they make their budgets. Senator Eric Schmidt is now on the record. Hey, Senator, good to be back with you. I want to jump right into the questions here. Whatever budget you'll approve this year will ultimately include funding for long-term projects that will last well beyond the end of the fiscal year. You'll vote, the president will sign it, and then construction workers will start bidding and shoveling and building. They might not actually get paid for years down the road until after their work is done. So, understanding that context, do you believe that a president in the future, maybe a Democrat, can go back in time, and block federal spending that Congress already approved?
Well, I think we're talking about grant funding, Mark. So if you want to be specific, the pause on the grant funding is to make sure that these programs don't violate, discriminatory protections like, having DEI in the grants. And so the executive branch is fully within its authority to pause grant funding to make sure they're legal. And I think what we're seeing, take for example USAID, Congress doesn't line item $2 million for Guatemalan sex changes, and it doesn't line item $6 million or $6 billion or whatever the number was for DEI trainings in Burma. They allocate dollars to USAID and then they spend it. So it's perfectly legal for the President of the United States within the executive branch to decide how that money is going to be spent. The difference between a lot of the lawsuits I had as AG in Missouri was Joe Biden was trying to do things those agencies were never charged with doing, like OSHA forcing a vaccine on 100 million people. This is perfectly within the purview of the federal government and the executive branch specifically to decide personnel issues and how to allocate those dollars.
It sounds like you're delineating grants from other ongoing infrastructure funding. I'll give you an example, though, about this grant funding from NBC News. A Johns Hopkins neuroscientist working to develop treatments and therapeutics for kids with developmental disabilities tells NBC News that President Trump and Elon Musk's cuts to the National Institutes of Health grants could compromise their research. This researcher called it, quote, devastating news for the parents. The White House says it will fund, quote, legitimate scientific research, but who in the White House is qualified to decide what science is legitimate?
So I'm glad you brought this up because this is a lot of misinformation about it that's being spun by the left and their media allies. The truth of the matter is, NIH funding, we want to have more money for research. Right now, under those grants, you can use 60% of the money for bureaucracy and utilities and rent and stuff that doesn't have anything to do with research. And so what they're doing is they're creating new guidelines to say, you can't use 60% of that, you can use 15% of that. So more money goes to research. As it relates to your other question about construction projects, the truth is when the money was allocated by Congress, Mark, it was for projects. What happened then is these agencies started putting ridiculous criteria on it that Congress never voted for, like, for example, a chips factory in Arizona. They weren't able to build it because they hadn't hired enough ex-convicts. Broadband wasn't being deployed because small contractors didn't have a climate action plan. So I think it's really important to sort of dig into the weeds here of money that's allocated and then agencies putting on additional burdens that Congress never intended. And NIH funding specifically, more money should go to research and less money should go to bureaucrats.
Of course, Congress has oversight of the funds. And to be clear, the media report that I cited there from NBC News did articulate that. It spelled out that universities can charge rent or other fees, basically a share of that grant funding. But I want to ask you specifically about WashU and St. Louis University here in St. Louis. They get tens of millions of dollars in federal grant funding through the NIH, National Science Foundation, Defense Department, Energy. Are you doing anything to protect the work these universities are doing?
I've talked to them about it. You know, we've had outreach and I've talked to them about it. Clarified a lot of the misinformation that the money's still going to flow through these NIH granting, assuming they're worthwhile, right? Of course, that would be an important function of government is oversight. But assuming it's worthwhile, the only thing that's being talked about is reducing the amount for bureaucrats from 60% to 15% so you can use more money from research. And I think that quelled a lot of concerns.
There are also concerns about the government workforce right now. A lot of these sweeping cuts or the mass firings, they're all being done under the guise of gutting DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion out of federal government. You've alluded to that here. St. Louis is, of course, home to a foundational piece of black history in America. The old courthouse is expected to open from its renovations this spring or summer. Inside those doors, you'll find ugly stories of America's original sin, about Dred and Harriet Scott, a number of other enslaved Americans. But the old courthouse gets federal funding from the National Park Service. Should historians there be free to tell the ugly truths about American history without fear of funding cuts?
Yeah, look, I'm glad you raised this because this is not the same thing. The idea, of course, you know, St. Louis played an important role. The Dred Scott case was very important in our nation's history. We should tell those stories. DEI is about cultural Marxism, Mark. It is about dividing the room in half by oppressor versus oppressed no matter what. It doesn't belong in our schools. It doesn't belong in our military. So it's not about telling stories. It's about struggle sessions and discriminatory hiring practices. It's about quotas. People reject that. That stuff's illegal, and we shouldn't be funding that stuff. But of course we should learn about our history, but those are two very different things.
All right, Senator, I'm told that we're out of time, but thanks for hopping on with us. Welcome back. Joining us now is one of the big three, if you will. She's on the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, the Comptroller of the City of St. Louis, Darlene Green. Good to have you with us. I think your maiden voyage on the record.
Yes, it is, and I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
For those of our viewers who may not know, you run the checkbook and the financial accounts of
Absolutely.
the city. And you have recently criticized the distribution of federal funds into North City over concerns raised by reporting in the newspaper, on our airwaves, and others about the fairness. When were you first aware that some of these grant awards were perhaps improper?
One of the things I will tell you is that I have been a strong voice on behalf of the businesses north, the north side businesses who were overlooked, those that are long-term, that have been in business, say 5 years, 10 years, even up to 25 years. They were overlooked when it came to COVID relief, the grants that came to the city, and the mayor announced this huge program for North City businesses, $37 million going towards that effort. And I found out that there were several businesses that had been overlooked. They talked to me by phone, we sat down, they sent messages, emails, and I was so disturbed that I had to do something, I had to speak out.
All right, you got a primary coming up just a week from Tuesday.
Absolutely, I do.
Why you and not the others?
Well, the people have asked me and have said to me they're grateful that I've decided to run again. And so I cannot ignore that, especially when we're talking about the city's tax dollars, when we're talking about protecting the taxpayers' money and continuing to protect the credit rating, which means so much to the growth of this city. So we want to grow our tax base. We want to continue to grow our city. Lift up downtown, lift up and rebuild North St. Louis, and continue to make this a good city that you want to choose to live in, work, and play.
Okay. Comptroller Darlene Green, thank you for your time. We're back in a moment. When we meet here again, Black History Month will be over, but the modern day fight over the 14th Amendment and birthright citizenship will remain a live issue. That, of course, have deep roots in Black history. And that question, who should be a citizen of this country, also has historic roots right here in this city. And one congressman in particular who helped to write that amendment was an advisor to Presidents Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses S. Grant. His distant relative brought radical Republican George Boutwell's story back to life in a new biography, and it shines a light on the original intent of that 14th Amendment.
These words were chosen carefully, and all children today, be they documented or undocumented immigrants, they're subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. So George would have said they, fall into the category of deserving birthright citizenship.
So we will check the record with author and historian Jeffrey Boutwell in an interesting conversation next week. And mark your calendars for Tuesday night, March 18 at 7 o'clock, when the top two candidates who emerge to face off in the St. Louis mayor's race debate right here in this studio live in prime time. Until next week, we're off the record.